At exactly 3:19 a.m. on November 14th, hospital security cameras captured something literally impossible: an unidentified figure standing completely motionless in the shadows outside room 417. Exactly 3 minutes later, the perfectly stable patient inside that room suddenly died. So what exactly was waiting in the dark that night? Let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the absolutely chilling timeline of the 3 a.m. rounds.
Now, you gotta understand, Daniel Cruz is not a guy who gets easily spooked. He's been a registered nurse for 11 years, and for 6 of those, he actively chose the night shift. He actually liked the dark. You know, the day shift is just pure chaos, doctors shouting, endless administrative noise. But at night, the hospital was a machine, and Daniel was its solitary mechanic. He felt this deep sense of total control over those long, empty corridors. But, as we're gonna see, that control was a complete illusion. To really get how wrong this night went, we have to put ourselves in Daniel's shoes and look at what normal sounded like. He knew the sensory details of this place by heart. The low, kind of oppressive hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above, the familiar wheeze of the fourth-floor ventilation that sounded almost like giant mechanical lungs breathing in the dark, the heavy groan of the East Wing elevator, and, of course, the steady rhythm of the cardiac monitors, literally the heartbeat of the ward. These sounds meant safety. They meant everything was totally fine, which makes the bizarre anomalies he was about to face so incredibly unsettling. So when Daniel clocked in, the handover from the day nurse was totally standard. The roster showed exactly 14 patients. Think about that for a second. 14 vulnerable people lying unconscious in the dark of this massive echoing building. And Daniel was literally the only barrier between them and whatever the night might bring. At first, it's just a perfectly routine shift, just 14 lives to monitor. But among those sleeping bodies was one patient whose condition was about to completely shatter that routine. Down the hall in room 408 was Harold Voss. He was a 73-year-old guy admitted a few days prior for kidney failure. Now, during the handover, the outgoing nurse specifically warned Daniel that Harold was highly agitated. And I don't mean just restless, he was completely terrified. He kept demanding the lights be turned off, his frail hands were physically shaking, and he was complaining in this cracked, breathless whisper that someone or something was standing perfectly still in the dark corner of his room. He said it was impossibly tall, just watching him, never making a single sound.
But look, Daniel's a medical professional, and in medicine, there's always a rational explanation, right? It's kind of like a defense mechanism to keep the fear away. He immediately chalks up Harold's terrifying visions to uremic encephalopathy. This is a very real, documented condition, basically a toxic confusion and severe hallucination caused by waste buildup when your kidneys start failing. Armed with this logical diagnosis to protect his own peace of mind, Daniel just goes into the room, adjusts Harold's blanket, leaves a dim nightlight on so it isn't pitch black, and walks right out. He figures it's just a dying man's mind playing cruel tricks. The night slowly drags on. You know the feeling, just the oppressive ticking of the wall clock. Daniel clocks in at 10:47 p.m. At midnight, he does his first rounds. The floor is entirely still. Harold is fast asleep, vitals are steady. But then, the whole timeline just fractures. At exactly 1:15 a.m., that suffocating silence is broken. The sharp beep of the call button from room 408 lights up the nurse's station in this harsh red glow. Daniel jogs down the dim hall, pushes the heavy door open, and finds Harold wide awake. The old man is sitting straight up, clutching his knees, pressed as far back against the headboard as he can possibly get, looking like a deeply terrified child. Daniel tries to calm him down. He literally steps right into the dark corner of the room, waving his arms around to prove it's completely empty. But Harold doesn't look confused at all. His eyes aren't glassy with delirium. Instead, they have this sharp, terrifying certainty to them. Harold slowly points a shaking finger at the empty space Daniel just walked through. And in a quiet, chilling whisper, he says, "He stepped aside when you walked over." The sheer conviction in his raspy voice sends a sudden, freezing wave right down Daniel's spine. But once again, Daniel forces himself to fall back on logic. He checks the vitals, gives Harold a mild sedative, and steps back out into the empty hall, desperately trying to shake off this deep dread. Well, the true horror escalates just over an hour later, at 2:40 a.m. Daniel is alone in the cramped break room, pouring another cup of coffee. He casually glances up at the grainy security monitor showing the fourth-floor hallway, and there it is, a motionless figure. It's draped in a pale hospital gown, just standing at the absolute far end of the hall near the locked stairwell. The camera feed is blurry, black and white, but you cannot mistake the posture. It's not walking, it's not wandering around lost, it is just standing there,
its head tilted at this deeply unnatural stiff angle, facing the blank wall. Just waiting. Daniel's heart is absolutely pounding, but protocol kicks in. A wandering patient is a massive liability, so he steps out and walks down the long corridor. But the only sound is the hollow echo of his own shoes. The hallway is entirely, terrifyingly empty. He walks to the far end, grabs the heavy stairwell door handle, and gives it a pull. It's securely locked from the outside. No one could have gone through there. Frantic now, he meticulously checks every single room, verifying that all 14 patients are safely fast asleep in their beds. Nobody is missing. But when he gets back to the nurse's station and looks up at the monitor, the screen is completely blank. The figure has vanished. He rubs his tired eyes and tells himself it was just a trick of the light, just a reflection on a cheap camera lens.
And then the clock on the wall clicks over to 3 a.m., the witching hour.
Right at 3 o'clock, the fluorescent lights in the hall begin to flicker violently. We're not talking about a slight dimming. It's a harsh, buzzing strobe effect, plunging the hall into total darkness before snapping back to a steady, blinding hum. And these weren't just mechanical glitches. Down the hall in room 412, a cardiac monitor lets out a brief, sudden shriek before stabilizing on its own. And as Daniel steps into the hallway to figure out what is happening, he sees something that absolutely freezes the blood in his veins. The heavy, solid wood door to room 408, Harold's room, is standing completely wide open. This is a door Daniel knows for an absolute fact he pulled completely shut an hour ago. He rushes in, his heart hammering. Think about this. Just hours ago, Harold was frantic, terrified of the corner, sweating and panicking. But now, the change is staggering. Harold is lying completely flat on his back. His hands are resting calmly by his sides. He's staring blankly straight up at the ceiling tiles in this deeply unnatural, serene state. He's not even blinking. And his vitals on the monitor, which were racing with pure terror earlier, are now perfectly, impossibly calm. It's literally like a switch was flipped in his brain. The silence in the room feels suffocating as Daniel slowly approaches the bed. Very slowly, in this unnatural, deliberate motion, Harold turns his head on the pillow to look at Daniel. He's gone now, Harold says, with zero emotion in his voice. Daniel's mouth is completely dry, and he asks him, who is gone? Harold blinks slowly and delivers a warning that shatters any remaining illusion of safety. I think he came for someone else tonight. The towering entity in the corner wasn't a hallucination brought on by failing kidneys. It was a harbinger, and it had just been waiting for its true target. 18 agonizing minutes pass. Daniel is sitting at the nurse's station, staring at the monitors in this heavy silence. And then, at exactly 3:22 a.m., a sudden, screaming flatline alarm violently rips through the quiet of the ward. The flashing red light violently illuminates the dark hallway. The alarm is coming from room 417, Patricia Ellison, a 66-year-old woman. Daniel sprints down the hall, skidding on the linoleum, and bursts through her door. And guys, this makes absolutely zero medical sense. Patricia was only admitted for minor stroke observation. She was completely stable just hours ago. Her chart was totally clear. For her to suddenly go into full cardiac arrest in the middle of the night is a complete medical impossibility. What happens next is a half hour of sheer, desperate panic. Daniel throws himself onto the bed and starts chest compressions immediately. The emergency crash team surges in within 4 chaotic minutes. They fight this brutal, continuous battle, pumping adrenaline, charging paddles, doing everything humanly possible to pull Patricia back. But after 22 agonizing minutes, it's totally futile. The flatline never wavers. Time of death is officially called at 3:44 a.m. The frantic energy drains away, and the room falls dead silent. And as the exhausted doctors slowly file out into the hall, Daniel stands there alone. He slowly turns his head and looks directly into the dark corner of Patricia's room, fully expecting to see it. But there are just ordinary, empty shadows. Now, the horror of that night doesn't actually end with Patricia's death. It's the aftermath that really proves it. Patricia, who had perfectly stable vitals, unexpectedly passes away, completely defying her medical charts. But meanwhile, down the hall, Harold Voss. 11 days later, his failing organs spontaneously heal. He makes a full, miraculous recovery that entirely baffles his doctors. He literally becomes the first kidney failure patient on that ward to fully recover in over 2 years. His survival gives this terrifying absolute weight to his midnight claim. The entity didn't want him. It really did come for someone else. Today, Daniel still works the night shift at Mercy General. He still walks those long, empty corridors at 3 a.m., but he is not comfortable in the dark anymore.
He's constantly looking over his shoulder, checking every heavy door, every grainy monitor, trying to maintain order. Because there is one piece of evidence from that night, one chilling piece of visual proof that neither Daniel nor the security team can ever explain away, no matter how hard they try. They pulled the hallway security footage for a final review to piece together the timeline of Patricia's death. And here is the ultimate terrifying twist. At exactly 3:19 a.m., just 3 minutes before Patricia's flatline alarm screams down the hall, an unidentified, towering figure appears out of thin air at the far end of the corridor. For 41 agonizing, silent seconds, the figure stands entirely motionless. It doesn't twitch, it doesn't breathe, it just stands there, facing the closed door of room 417. And then at 3:20 a.m., without walking away or making a single human movement of any kind, it vanishes instantly from the feed. It wasn't a mechanical glitch. It wasn't a trick of the light on a cheap camera. It was there. So the crucial, haunting question remains: who or what was waiting in the dark on the 4th floor that night? To survive the night and brave more terrifying mysteries with us, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more dark explainers.
Imagine for a second answering a 911 call at 3:17 in the morning. You hear a woman absolutely terrified, whispering that someone is in her house. But the horrifying part? It's not just the intruder. It's the fact that police traced this very call to a property that had been padlocked, abandoned, and decaying for an entire decade. Oh, and the woman begging for her life on the other end of the line? She vanished without a single trace exactly 35 years ago. So let me ask you, what would you do if the dead called 911? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into a terrifying true mystery. It all starts in the deep shadows and the eerie, glowing blue light of the Pinewood County Emergency Dispatch Center. We're going to walk through an event so chilling, so fundamentally impossible, that it permanently altered how local investigators view the silence of the night. Part 1. The Still Night. On February 19th, seasoned dispatcher Alicia Harmon was working the overnight shift all by herself. She was just sitting there, waiting in that heavy, almost cinematic silence of what they call a still night. You know the kind of night. The kind where the quiet feels heavy, like something is just waiting to happen.
Part 2. The First Call. At exactly 1:34 a.m., that heavy tension finally breaks. The console lights up. It's a landline call coming from a 731 area code. But when Alicia answers, she doesn't hear a voice. All she can hear is this low, rhythmic sound, kind of like wind or really heavy breathing. Now, normally, a landline gives dispatchers an immediate address, but Alicia's screen just flashes a frustrating bright red system error, location data unavailable. After 40 agonizing seconds of that terrible breathing, the line goes completely dead. Alicia tries standard callbacks, but every single ring goes straight to a voicemail that hasn't even been set up. It's a total dead end. So she logs the call, probably shivering a bit, and tries her best to shake off the unease.
Part 3. Voice in the dark. Fast forward to 3:17 a.m. The exact same number calls back. But this time, the silence on the line feels thick. It feels occupied. Suddenly, a woman's terrified, incredibly flat whisper breaks through the static. She says she is not safe. Alicia immediately shifts into protocol. She asks, "Is there someone in the house with you?" The woman, who says her name is Carol, just replies, "Yes." She confesses she's trapped. She's hiding inside an upstairs bedroom while she can hear someone else moving around downstairs. Alicia is frantically trying to gauge the immediate threat here, right? So she asks, "Are they hurting you?" Carol's answer, "Not yet." Just think about the creeping dread in that flat response. Not yet. It makes the ultra-realistic horror of her situation so painfully clear. She knows what's coming. She is literally just sitting in the dark waiting for it. Desperate to find a way to secure her, Alicia asks, "Is the door locked?" Carol's response is chillingly hopeless. She says, "There's no lock. There never was." And when Alicia pushes for a specific address, Carol reveals something completely bizarre. She says she's been trapped there for so long, she's actually forgotten her exact address. She can only remember one single detail: the name Harlan Road. Now Alicia is scrambling. She's pulling up maps, trying to pinpoint this rural location on Harlan Road, but before she can establish exactly where Carol is hiding, Carol whispers her final, absolutely terrifying words: "He's coming upstairs." Then the line abruptly dies, and what replaces that terrified, desperate voice? That exact same low, rhythmic breathing from the very first call. Part 4. the empty house. Alicia instantly dispatches deputies Roy Callahan and Linda Marsh. Their mission? Check every single property on that sparsely populated road. First, they check the occupied farms. They're waking up confused families in the middle of the night, but nobody has heard a thing. With no signs of Carol anywhere, they arrive at the very last property at the end of the road, the old Pemberton house. The driveway is totally empty. The house is pitch black, and there is a heavy, rusted padlock right on the front door. It looks completely abandoned, just sitting there surrounded by thick fog and deep shadows. The deputies radio back that there's absolutely nothing there. But the absolute terror escalates at 4:18 a.m. Alicia is desperate, so she redials the number. And you guys, someone picks up. It's Carol, but her voice is totally different now. She says, "You sent someone? I heard the car. They already left." Carol explicitly names the Pemberton house. That is the exact padlocked house the deputies had just cleared and walked away from.
Alicia practically screams over the radio for the deputies to go back and break inside right now. Deputy Roy uses bolt cutters to snap that heavy padlock. When they step inside, they find an absolute nightmare. But it's not the one they were expecting. The house has been abandoned since 2003. There's a thick, undisturbed layer of dust coating literally every single surface. No footprints, no signs of forced entry anywhere. But when they go into the second upstairs bedroom, sitting right there on a nightstand beside a bare, stripped bed is a 1970s rotary telephone. And when Deputy Roy picks up the receiver, he hears a live, buzzing dial tone.
The next morning, they're trying to make sense of this impossible reality. The county telecom coordinator pulls the actual system logs, and those logs confirm, without a shadow of a doubt, that those terrifying 911 calls definitively originated from the Pemberton house, a house that had been padlocked, covered in undisturbed dust, and completely, utterly empty the entire night. Part 5. 35 years gone. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Alicia spends the next week digging deep into the dark history of the Pemberton property. The property records reveal a pretty tragic timeline. The house was built back in 1954 by the Pemberton family, and it was occupied all the way up until 2003 when it was finally left vacant. But the absolutely crucial point is what happened right in the middle. In 1989, a 31-year-old woman named Carol Ann Whitfield vanished without a trace near Harlan Road. Her disappearance was never solved. She was never, ever found. The caller's name was Carol. The location was Harlan Road. But here is the piece of information that is going to make your blood run cold. Carol vanished on February 19th, exactly 35 years to the very day before Alicia Harmon sat alone in that dispatch center and received her frantic calls for help.
Part 6. Someone is waiting.
Alicia submitted a full report, and technically the investigation remains open. But she says she can no longer sit in that dispatch center without fearing what the empty silence might actually contain. And there is a very specific reason for her fear. It's a detail that was completely missing from Deputy Roy's initial adrenaline-fueled report from that night. Because when investigators went back later to thoroughly process that deep, shadowy upstairs bedroom, they noticed something truly spine-chilling right next to that rotary phone.
Pressed flat into the thick, decade-old dust on the nightstand were two perfectly clean marks. They were the exact size and spacing of a pair of human hands, resting flat against the wood, waiting. Someone or something sat by that phone in the dark, waiting for 35 years. If you survived this terrifying explainer, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more true mysteries, and let us know down in the comments. What would you do if the dead called you?
Imagine standing completely still in the freezing dark, knowing the breathless man outside just told you something ancient is buried exactly where you stand. There's nowhere to run, and absolutely no one is coming to help you. Tonight, we're unpacking the chilling logs of Room 11.
Part 1. The Hargrove Motor Inn, Route 9, rural Montana.
So, the Hargrove is this decaying, single-story building, completely surrounded by miles of absolute swallowing darkness. I mean, the nearest town is a full 14 miles away. Into this literal void steps 27-year-old Jessica Pruitt to work the graveyard shift. It's October, and on a weekday rotation, this motel averages practically zero occupancy. Tonight, out of 12 rooms, only a single one is occupied. Room 11. It's sitting way down at the dead end of this unevenly lit, desolate walkway. Jessica's entire night basically revolves around the silence stretching between her desk and that one solitary space. Now, you have to notice this weird anomaly in the registration paperwork. The guest checked in during the day shift with the owner, Frank Delaney, and paid cash for one night under the name Thomas Elling. But look at this note Frank left in the margin. It says, guest requested assistance with form. Frank literally had to write the name himself because Thomas Elling was, for whatever reason, completely unable to write his own name on a simple registration card. It's just a small, clinical detail, right? But it sets this immediate creeping tone of wrongness.
Okay, so it hits 12:20 a.m. The office is dead quiet. Suddenly, the internal intercom on Jessica's desk rings. It's a 2-digit display. Room 11. This is literally the very first break in the silence of her shift. She picks it up, announces herself, and dead air. Just dead air, followed by this sound. It's a slow, low, heavy exhale, almost like someone breathing out with agonizing caution. Finally, this quiet, really deliberate man's voice breaks through the static, just stating simply that his heating unit isn't working. So Jessica, being the methodical and helpful clerk she is, grabs a heavy electric portable space heater from the closet. She steps out into the biting, purposeful cold of a rural Montana October night. She walks the entire length of the property, passing 10 completely dark rooms until she reaches this thin little line of light slipping from under the door of room 11.
She knocks. She announces she has the heater. After this painfully long pause, the muffled voice tells her to just leave it outside. Jessica is standing out there in the freezing cold holding this heavy unit, and he absolutely refuses to open the door while she's there. So she sets it down and walks away. And only after she turns her back and puts some distance between herself and the room does she hear that heavy door finally unlatch, open for just a second, and snap shut.
Some time passes. The quiet of the office kind of settles back in. But then, at exactly 2:05 a.m., the shrill ring of the desk phone completely cuts through the silence for a second time. The display lights up again. Room 11.
Now, Jessica has this habit of documenting everything, which actually grounds all this escalating dread in pure clinical reality. She logs this bizarre complaint word for word. Elling calls to report a smell in the room. When Jessica asks him to describe it, he says it smells like something old, like something that's been closed up for a long time. And when she asks where the smell is coming from, his answer is immediate: under the bed. So Jessica politely offers to move him to a different room completely free of charge if the smell is bothering him. His refusal is instantaneous. He says he will stay in 11, and then he drops this incredibly unsettling line, delivered with zero hesitation. He just says, "I don't sleep." And guys, it's not a complaint about insomnia. The way he says it, it's stated as a permanent, absolute condition of his existence. Then Elling asks how long room 11 has been there. When Jessica explains the motel was built about 60 years ago, he actually corrects her. He delivers this chilling history not as some crazy theory or a question, but as a flat, undeniable fact. He tells her that before the room, before the building, something else was on this exact patch of dirt. He's speaking to her with the absolute authority of someone who was literally there to see it. Jessica logs the interaction, obviously totally unnerved, but she tries to keep it professional. Which brings us to the dead of night. 3:30 a.m., Jessica's been doing inventory, just trying to shake off that really strange conversation. She looks up from her paperwork, glancing out the front office window into the vast, shadowed parking lot. And what she sees out there makes her blood run absolutely cold. There's a silhouette of a man in a dark coat standing in the parking lot right outside room 11. He's facing the empty road, completely away from the building. Because of a burned-out overhead light, his features are just swallowed by the shadows. And the creepy part? He isn't pacing. He isn't smoking a cigarette. He's standing there with this terrifying, unnatural, absolute stillness. You can imagine the panic starting to build. Jessica picks up the internal line and dials room 11, never taking her eyes off the man. The phone rings 8 times. No one answers. She puts the receiver down and just watches him. For 4 full minutes, she stares at this figure. He doesn't shift his weight. He doesn't even twitch. He exhibits the absolute stillness of something that just isn't human. At exactly 3:34 a.m., a lone truck rumbles down Route 9. It's literally the very first vehicle to pass the motel all night long. As it approaches, its bright headlights sweep in this huge, wide arc directly across the dark asphalt of the Hargrove's parking lot. And in that brief flash of illumination, the impossible becomes real. When the beam of light hits the exact spot where the man was standing, he isn't walking away, he isn't ducking behind a car, he is simply gone. The parking lot is completely empty. Jessica frantically dials the room again. 8 more rings, nothing but silence. At this point, Jessica flat out refuses to go outside. She locks herself in the bright safety of the office. Then, at 4:10 a.m., the inevitable happens. The phone rings one final time. Jessica snatches it up before the first ring even finishes. It's him. When she nervously mentions seeing him outside, he smoothly claims he just needed air. He then pivots to this unhurried, deeply eerie philosophy. He starts talking about how people pass through roadside motels for just one night, but leave pieces of themselves behind. He tells Jessica he finds it comforting that places hold things. It's a truly terrifying thought. The idea that this room is acting like a sponge for decades of transient souls, and this entity is either feeding on, or at least reveling in, that accumulation. The call ends with a quiet, devastating threat. He tells her softly, "Don't come to the room tonight, Jessica." And here is the truly horrifying realization. Jessica only ever introduced herself as Jessica from the front desk. She never gave him her last name. Guests never remember the night clerk's name anyway. But Thomas Elling knows exactly who she is, speaking to her with this predatory familiarity that makes it crystal clear she is entirely at his mercy.
Part 2, the morning after. Dawn at the Hargrove. When the pale dawn finally brings some sense of survival, the owner, Frank Delaney, arrives. He reads Jessica's horrifying logbook with absolutely zero expression on his face, pours a cup of coffee, and just stares out at the dark sedan parked in front of room 11. Desperate, Jessica asks if this has happened before, and Frank reveals his heavy secret. Every few years, he says a guest always comes to room 11. They always use a different name, they always pay in cash, they always leave before dawn. And when Frank goes to check them out, they are never, ever there. So when Frank finally walks down to room 11 at 7:30 a.m., that dark sedan has vanished without a single sound. Inside, the room is pristine. The bed is made with hospital corners, surfaces wiped completely down, and that heavy space heater neatly returned to the storage closet in the locked front office without a single person seeing it happen. But there's one final, lingering detail Frank notes in the maintenance log. Remember that call at 2:05 a.m.? The complaint about the smell of something incredibly old coming from under the heavy motel bed? Well, Frank checks under there, and what he finds completely recontextualizes this entire night of terror. The horrifying answer is written right here in the maintenance log. The industrial carpet under the bed, carpet that hadn't been replaced or properly deep cleaned since the 1990s, was perfectly, immaculately clean. All the decades of built-up dust, grime, and debris had been completely cleared away. Why? Because whatever checked into room 11 under the name Thomas Elling hadn't been sleeping in the bed. It had spent the entire night lying completely flat underneath it, scraping away the dust, pressing itself into the ground, trying to get as close as physically possible to whatever ancient thing was buried in the dirt below. Jessica quit working nights shortly after this. But Frank still works the day shift. The Hargrove is still open. And every few years, a man who literally cannot write his own name pays cash for room 11, just waiting for the sun to go down. If you loved uncovering this terrifying log, make sure to like and subscribe to this explainer. What would you do if the phone rang at 2 a.m.? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next analysis.